Hey guys, what's going on? This is Andrew here today, and we're going to be continuing the series that I like to call My History with Gaming, and today we're going to be covering my history with Nintendo. Let's start off by talking about how I started with Nintendo. As mentioned in my last video when talking about the Xbox, there was a time where my dad just didn't want me touching his games without him being around, and this caused me to want to get a system for myself to play around. With that, I didn't have to worry about him being around for it. The first system that I ever owned was a Gameboy Advance Sp in 2006, and the first three games that I ever owned were Sonic the Hedgehog, SpongeBob the Movie, and Pokemon Emerald. I ended up playing those games for a very long time, and Pokemon Emerald to this day is still my favorite Pokemon game ever released. I would grow my library of games as special occasions came along, and it wasn't very long before I got my first home console, which I shared with my brothers, the Gamecube. The reason that I got this console was because I had a cousin my age who had an older brother that had it, and I used to love playing it at their house. The first game that I got for the platform was LEGO Star Wars, and it's a game that I still play frequently to this day at the time of this video, and I'm currently replaying the complete saga on PC and waiting for that Skywalker saga to come out. One of my friends I still talk to even now played LEGO Star Wars with me for hours on end, and we would have sleepovers just to play the game together even longer. Other than playing it with him, I also played the game to help my brothers develop their coordination for video games. Unfortunately, the middle brother didn't catch on very quickly, so it was very hard to play with him sometimes, but the game sped up his process as he eventually got better because of the game. As for my youngest brother, we didn't play games with him until much later because, well, he was a baby at the time. He's 5 years younger than me. As time went on, I would grow my library for the platform, finding some amazing games I still love like crazy today, such as Sonic Adventure 1 and 2, Spider-Man 1 and 2, Star Wars Jedi Knight 2, Jedi Outcast, and quite possibly my favorite game on the system, Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness. When it comes to Gale of Darkness, it's one of those games I look at today as my favorite looking Pokemon game, and I've been waiting basically my entire life for us to get a main series Pokemon game to look as great as that one did, or at the very least get us a remaster of that game. Basically, I would have loved to see like the Diamond and Pearl remake look like that, so I was disappointed with how it looked, which I'll be actually talking about in my next video. Later down the line in 2007, as discussed in my last video, I got my own copy of The Lord of the Rings: The Two Towers after my dad wouldn't let me play it on his Xbox without him being there, and I would play that game for hours until he eventually took it away when I was acting out parts of the game and being too violent. This is the part where we fill in the gap from the last video of what I did while I was no longer allowed to play violent games, as well as when my dad's Xbox was broken. So, as I said, this is 2007. I just got my DS for Christmas that year, and as funny as it sounds, my favorite thing on the system was the PictoChat. As I will discuss in an eventual video of my history with PC, I used to entertain myself by just typing random shit into Microsoft Word, so PictoChat was really just the next place for me to do that. I used to play it with my cousins all the time, and only 2 months later, my brother got a DS for his birthday, and I would play it with him. In all the time that I played DS, guys, I ended up actually getting a DS Lite, DSi, and DSi XL. I remember all the times I got it, like when I got each one of them. The DS Lite was the Christmas present, as I said. The DSi I got as a surgery present when I got my tonsils removed in the 2nd grade. And the DSi XL I bought for the fuck of it because I remember I had money for my birthday just in a drawer somewhere, and when my friend told me how much the XL cost, I was like, Mom, let's go to GameStop. So we did. I was about to pay for the DS with my money in 4th grade, guys. We're talking 4th grade here, and my mom's like, don't spend that money, put it into savings. She whips out her wallet and pays for it for me. Such a great mom, I gotta tell you guys. Other than that, what's strange is that I can't remember what else I played on the system other than Sonic Rush Adventure and Nintendogs, at least for that time. I also can't remember if I was still actively playing the GameCube at the time, so we're going to skip a year to 2008. This year was when I got my Wii, and that is probably the console that I have some of my best childhood memories on altogether. Some games to be included from that time have to be Wii Sports and Wii Play, WarioWare, Smash Bros. Brawl, honestly my controversial favorite Smash game, and LEGO Indiana Jones. Wii Sports was a game that I owned, but I would frequently be at my grandmother's house where my cousins and I would play Wii Play and WarioWare along with that game. Later on, we would start grinding Smash Bros. Brawl, and we eventually beat the campaign together. But there was one game that took over that would eventually be one of my favorite franchises of all time, and that game was Pokemon Pearl in 2009 after the holidays around my birthday. On my birthday, I received the game as a gift while my family and I were at a hotel about to attend a high school graduation party for someone in my family. That day, I fell in love with the Pokemon franchise. A few days later, my family had a huge party for me, my uncle, and my grandfather since all of our birthdays are in June, and I got Pokemon Diamond from my grandma and Pokemon Platinum from my cousin. At this point, I had every Gen 4 game in just a matter of a few days, and I grinded those games for an entire year. This was now my Pokemon phase, and I was in the 3rd grade talking about it every single day. One day, my cousin calls me and tells me that there's a new Pokemon game called Heart Gold and Soul Silver, and at this time, him and I didn't know they were remakes. If there's one thing you guys should know about my cousin, though, he really does his research and he figured that out eventually, even back then. At this time, I didn't really use the internet much, but he did, and he would always find stuff out and tell me about it. So fast forward to 2010, and Pokemon Heart Gold and Soul Silver were released in the US. Around that time, I also got Guitar Hero for the DS and the Wii. I got Heart Gold when I was younger, and my brother got Soul Silver, and we both got the bundles with the Pokewalker. The Pokewalker gimmick actually had me interested for about 6 months, but just like everybody else, I eventually dropped it. Here's the thing, I love Gen 2 nowadays, but back then I didn't really care for it that much. I wasn't one to focus on dialogue that much, and I always got stuck in the game since I didn't know where to go next since I was skipping dialogue. My cousin actually helped me whenever I got stuck because he beat the games before me. Eventually I beat the game and then beat Soul Silver after buying my copy, but I didn't play the games ever again after that. In fact, I went back to playing Platinum when I was done with those 2 games, starting to try to collect all the Pokemon in that game. For Christmas that year, I got a Super Nintendo, Game Boy, and Game Boy Color, and the entire Pokemon series. That caused me to play through the whole franchise and eventually figure out that Emerald was my favorite. Not long after that, my cousin let me know about Black and White, and that was the year that I started watching YouTube. When it came out in Japan, I would watch gameplay videos of it, and by that time it came out in the US in 2011, I beat the entire game on day 1 since I knew exactly where to go, and then I helped my entire 4th grade class beat the game right after that. So around this time, I was also introduced to another console that every retro gamer should have, and that is the NES. This system belonged to my uncle, and one day, him and my father showed me the games on there. My first game that I tried was Mario Bros, and then immediately I jumped over to Duck Hunt and fell in love with it. At the time, I was really young and didn't pay attention to the graphics, so I just saw these as normal games that were a lot of fun. On top of that, I actually played this game before I got a New Super Mario Bros. On the Wii, and basically that's the game that got me into playing that, and it got me and my youngest brother playing, because as I mentioned before, we didn't really play many games with him because when I was playing them when I was younger, he was too young to play. But at this point, he was 4 years old, and he started playing video games himself, and we would play New Super Mario Bros. With him all the time, as well as the original Mario Bros. And in fact, I was stuck on the last boss of New Super Mario Bros. On Bowser, couldn't beat it myself. I ended up dropping the game. One day, I came home from school. Since he was only 4, he only was in preschool and would go to school for 2 hours, so he would always be home before I was home. And basically, I came home and watched him beat the game at 4 years old when I was stuck on the level at like nearly 10 years old. So pretty funny. So let's get back into the topic of retro gaming. The last big game that I played on the NES was Punch-Out, and to this day, it's still one of my favorite games on the NES that I still play all the time. For years, we left that console at my grandparents' house on my dad's side, and I would look forward to playing the games on the system every time we went there. But nowadays, we actually eventually passed it down to my brother, but now it's my system in my collection. This is where things start to get bad. Unfortunately, by the time 5th grade hit, I lost my interest in Pokemon completely, and at this point, I went to GameStop and turned in all of my Pokemon games for barely any money. Luckily, as it turned out though, my copy of Pokemon Black was hidden in a drawer somewhere that I eventually found, but unfortunately, everything else was gone. As talked about in my last video, this is when my Guitar Hero phase started. I had been playing Guitar Hero at this point since 3rd grade with my cousin, but we basically played it casually. One day, I picked the game back up, and I literally never stopped playing from there. No one in my school played it anymore, it was just me by myself until I got 2 of my friends to play it with me once in a while. Like I said in my last video, they were more into games like Call of Duty than what I was doing. It wasn't until a year later that I found out that my childhood best friend Frankie played the game, and we started talking again and played the game together for years to come. After the 6th grade though, something happened that happens to a lot of middle schoolers. Skip to 2013, and I felt like I was too mature for Nintendo games. At this time, I felt like if you were playing Nintendo games, you were a little kid if you were playing them as a teenager, and I put Nintendo to the side for years unless I was playing Guitar Hero on the Wii, obviously. But one thing I forgot to mention is that in the 6th grade, I also sold my SNES, GBA, GBC, DSi, and half of my Gamecube collection to a retro game store called The Revolution. For the first time ever, I'm referring to this time period as my Nintendo hiatus. 2013 all the way to 2015, I had absolutely no interest in playing Nintendo games. I remember looking at certain people that I knew at this time who played them as diehard fans, as not real gamers, and it sucks remembering that because I know there are a ton of people who have that kind of mindset nowadays towards Nintendo fans. What was weird though is that I had a different view of those who played retro Nintendo games, and I was actually playing the Gamecube at that time. When 2015 hit, at that point my younger brother and I already had our own consoles, but my youngest brother didn't. I felt like since he was 9, it only made sense for him to get the Wii U because he was young, and at the time, I thought that the console was just aimed at kids, and basically the way that you saw in those Nintendo commercials, it really did make it look that way. As it turned out, I don't know if I ever saw him pick up the system himself. In fact, we had this family PC that we used to all use that had a Pentium in it and no graphics card, and he spent much more time on that, regardless of playing games with terrible performance. I eventually found myself sitting down to play the system myself, and as it turned out, I enjoyed it quite a bit. Don't get me wrong, it is possibly one of my least favorite consoles of all time, but I did enjoy some of the games I had on it. It was then that I realized that video games were just video games, and as time went on, Review Tech USA's videos actually helped me realize this as well, since he covered the topic and made that point quite a lot. At some point, my family was hogging the TV more, and nobody was playing the console at all, and my brother just ended up giving the Wii U to me for me to play in my room, and later that year, I got the Nintendo 64 as my first retro game console purchased by myself of a Nintendo console. Skip to 2017, and this was the year that the Switch came out, and only a few months before my gaming hiatus. At the time of getting this console, before getting my Series X obviously in 2020, this was the closest I had ever gotten a console to its launch date, and Breath of the Wild absolutely blew me away. Around this time, I felt no need to get other games for the console other than that, since I used to go to the retro game store called The Revolution every weekend before it shut down, where we would play games like Mario Kart 8 Deluxe and ARMS. Eventually down the line, my friend Michael pre-ordered me Super Mario Odyssey, and as controversial as my opinion is, it's my favorite 3D Mario game ever made. For the rest of that year before my gaming hiatus, the Switch was my most played console for some time, but I unfortunately never finished Breath of the Wild even today, thanks to my hiatus. Once that gaming hiatus ended, as discussed in my last video, I got LA Noire for the Switch, and I played it heavily until I was done with it. Only a few months later, I got a Super Nintendo and DS again, and I started collecting heavily for the Super Nintendo, as it is now one of my favorite systems of all time, actually in my top 5. But once I started paying attention to the gaming industry again, I started noticing that Nintendo was starting to do things that I didn't like. As much as I love the Switch and everything that they've done for the most part this generation, I've now started to notice that Nintendo stopped making the quality stuff that they did in the beginning of the generation of the Switch. I was semi-okay with the re-releases, but I started getting really annoyed when I started seeing the price tags on the re-releases rather than seeing them at a lower price. But the one thing that angered me heavily was the minimal amount of effort that they put into Super Mario 3D All-Stars, so much to the point where I said, screw my collector side, I am not buying this game. As much as I love Nintendo and the games they've made, I've been quite frustrated with their industry decisions lately. So anyway guys, that's my history with Nintendo. I have to say that they were a huge part of my childhood, and I'll go as far to say that they were more of a part of my childhood than Xbox was. I really am looking forward to what Nintendo has next, and I'm hoping that they'll stop doing some of the things that I disagree with. As a gamer of all platforms, I will always love each individual platform for what it is, but I'll always be there to criticize them whenever there's an issue that needs to be addressed. In my next video, we will be talking about my history with PlayStation. Thank you all for watching this video. I will see you all in the next one.